Vera.
And I'm Slowetti Spaghetti. And we like to go on cycling trips and have been doing so for over a dozen years.
In this video we would like to share some of the memories we have on the second part of the trip we did in 2013.
If you saw our last video, you will recall that the first part of our journey led us from where we live in the northeast of Switzerland, all across northern France and over the Channel to England. This was to pay my grandmother a visit.
Which was also fun and interesting for me, as I was glad to be able to meet her and hear all the stories of you when you were a child before she passed away.
Oh yes, she was always very good towards me and called me her favourite grandson.
Yes, and she was ever so proud that we visited her on a bicycle. So we had a lovely stay and it was well worth our while.
And the trip getting there was really interesting and easier than we had anticipated.
Except for the last bit in England, which didn't really leave a good impression on us.
The landscape was very pleasing, with fields and meadows and small country lanes.
But the condition of the roads was horrible, and we kept getting lost.
Although I must say that we hadn't really been well prepared and our tyres weren't really very suitable for the rough English roads.
So instead of cycling back from Sevenoaks to Dover, we cheated and caught a train. Happy to escape the bad conditions and looking forward to enjoy the easy-to-cycle roads in France once again.
On the second part of our trip, we cycled approximately 1,200 kilometres, crossing France from north to south.
Thankfully, we didn't have to follow any red lines when departing for Calais, like we had to when we had arrived a couple of days earlier.
Not much later, and we had already set up camp in Calais and watched our ferry once again departing for Dover, relieved that we weren't on board.
So off we were once again, soon crossing the railway lines near the terminal of the Channel Tunnel, or the Channel, as the British call it, which technically turned Great Britain into a part of the continent and forced it to give up its status as an island in 1994.
The kids were having a good time in this makeshift recreational park in the city centre of Amiens, a town of 130,000 inhabitants.
Amiens has a rich history going back to pre-Roman times and was home to the famous Jules Verne, but is more recently known as the birthplace of Emmanuel Jean-Michel Frédéric Macron, the current French president.
It was towards evening when we left Amiens, not before inquiring in the tourist office about where the next campsite was.
Which was apparently about 10 kilometers south, or so they said.
Well, it turned out that the campsite had ceased to exist 10 years earlier and had been converted to a public park. But we put up our tent there anyway.
Next morning we started out at the crack of dawn.
We were really enjoying the peaceful countryside, so we had second thoughts on our original plan of crossing through Paris.
Because not only were we a bit fearsome of the traffic, but it was also very hot.
So we decided to stay at a campsite on the outskirts of the metropolitan area and pass Paris on the east side of the suburbs, joining the Seine River in Melun.
We set out the next morning early again and soon arrived at the Château de Chantilly.
It was built in 1560 and is famous for its unique triangular shape and sheer size.
And is usually overrun by tourists, but we were up well before any coaches had appeared.
We turned away from the Seine River, cycled through the woods and sort of stumbled upon this building here.
Fontainebleau, the majestic castle in which many kings resided. And we had it all to ourselves.
It was built in the first half of the 16th century and served primarily as a base camp for hunting sessions in the surrounding woods.
We had a walk around. Its name basically means beautiful water fountain, and the original spring still exists. But we didn't bother looking for that, and instead counted all the chimney stacks we could see. After that, we continued on our journey south, first passing under the impressive aqueduct, which was built in 1875 and traverses the Fontainebleau forest.
This Roman amphitheatre came as a surprise, as it was basically in the middle of nowhere.
A whole network of canals crisscrosses France.
Built between the 16th and 19th century, they were used as superhighways and trade routes to distribute goods from the main ports to all across the land, or even inland from coast to coast.
Of course, nowadays their main purpose is for tourists, cruising along in yachts or tuckering along in old barges. There are so many canals that when cycling through the country, they are unavoidable.
Many of the tow paths have recently been converted to cycle paths, or voies vertes, as the French call their greenways, helping to make a nationwide network of long-distance routes that keeps things flat. And of course, boats can't climb over mountains.
However, slight elevations were mastered by using locks, of which there are hundreds if not thousands.
And sometimes even overcoming steep hills, like here.
These are the locks of the former Canal Henri IV, now called the Canal de Briare. The 7 locks ascend 45 meters on one side and 25 meters on the other, and it is the oldest documented series of locks to form steps worldwide.
It dates back to 1604 and connects the Loire and Seine Valley basins.
The nearby village Rony was renamed in 1978 to commemorate this milestone of engineering to Rony-le-Sept-Écluse, so not really all that long ago.
At this point, we had been following the Loire River and were slowly approaching the majestic Loire, which would lead us further south. After several days, we arrived in Vichy, which has a rather controversial history as it was once the capital of Vichy France, a rump state under the German occupation in the 1940s. The details of the time are somewhat elusive and can't be explained in a nutshell, so I suggest you check out the Wikipedia entry if you want to find out more.
Less well known is that Vichy was originally famous for its thermal baths, indicating that we were now leaving the lowlands of central France and heading up into the volcanic mountains of the Auvergne.
This sweet little village and castle lays on the top of an ancient volcanic vent in an almost awe-inspiring, iconic way.
But little did we realize that this was only an appetizer in comparison to what lay on the other side of the hill.
Puy-en-Velay, an absolutely stunning town in the middle of a volcanic crater. Its two stacks of basalt home to the church Saint-Michel-d'Aiguille, difficult one to pronounce that,
or St. Michael on the Needle, which seems very appropriate.
and the Notre Dame de la France, who keeps an eye on the town from above.
She is actually a really good example of recycling, or upcycling, to be more precise, as she was constructed out of the metal of 213 confiscated Russian cannons the French obtained in the siege of Sevastopol in 1856.
A further attraction is the Cathedral of Notre Dame de Puy, Puy meaning the top or summit of a volcanic elevation. Its facade is striped in white sandstone and black volcanic breccia, and it was shaped to form a basilica.
Puy-en-Velay is also famous for its lentils, and my father wasn't happy at all when I told him I had visited the town and didn't bring any home.
In the midst of this breathtaking scenery, we passed by the watchtower of La Briare, which was the residence of the knights Briare, who were responsible for guarding the path in medieval times and protecting travellers by accompanying them through the canyons. And in the spirit of the schools of chivalry that were flourishing in France from the 12th century, were of course on horseback.
Of course it was me who had to climb up the ladder to make it to the top of the tower to take a picture of the cowboys on horses. Because Slow Eddie Spaghetti here is afraid of heights. So he missed out on the amazing view.
The Lac de Villefort marked the point where we turned east, soon leaving the higher altitudes and descending along the Seine River. And going downhill was going to be fun, but I found it rather concerning that my frame started to sort of wobble whenever I hit more than 30 kilometers an hour. Although we had sent some stuff home when we were in England, we were still carrying far too much weight and hadn't distributed it well, with everything being in the back panniers. But our destination was only about 50 kilometers away, and the scenery wasn't about to get any less spectacular, so the panoramic views distracted me from my worries.
We had just made it to our destination before all the lavender got harvested. And it's a shame that this video can't capture the soothing scent in the air.
In the evening, we looked back on the most amazing trip we had ever accomplished in our lives. We had left the brick buildings of the north of France behind us, crossed the hustle of the Parisian suburbs, stumbled upon great historic monuments, and succeeded in climbing the wilderness of the Central Massif.
We had arrived exhausted at Briare here, but this time we felt more than inspired and full of energy. Cycling for 15 days straight with only one day pausing had been invigorating, and the more we progressed, the more physically fit we became.
Yes, in fact, I would have wished I had been as fit as when we had arrived as when we had originally started out on our first part of the trip when we had left home to go to England.
Which meant that we were already looking forward to plan our next journey for the coming year. And in the coming days we had already arranged to visit our vacation friends who we knew from our stays here in the Seine Valley and who lived in Brittany. And that was even further away than England. Cycling had certainly seduced us on the brink of becoming addicted. But for the moment we just wanted to lay around and do nothing as we had planned. And it would only be 2 weeks before we would hit the road again and cycle 5 days back home to Geneva, coming across new section of the Via Rona that had been completed that year.
But if we wanted to continue cycling long distances like this, there would be a couple of things we would have to modify.
Yes, for example, we would need more durable tires that wouldn't puncture as easily and would also be better suited to go off-road.
And we would need front panniers to distribute the weight more evenly, also allowing us to carry a little bit more volume.
And the realization of how much easier cycling is if you are physically fit, and how much you gain physical fitness as you progress, was something we wanted to pay more attention to in the future. The level of fitness we achieved was far greater than we could ever maintain in our usual daily routines.
Which is why we decided to plan a shorter trip the following April before setting out for our long summer adventure.
which was really nice as we discovered some of the most colorful towns in Europe.
And we're able to test out some new equipment.
It was really fun making this video and I hope you enjoyed it too.
If you did, please hit the like button.
And the subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next video and our next trip.
So
thanks for watching and bye bye!